Stop for a moment, because the words you are about to hear may explain something you have been feeling but could never put into words. Someone has been carrying a sentence in their heart, a sentence they almost said, a sentence that could change everything between you, and the strange part is that the sentence begins with something you never expected to hear: I can only accept you as my partner on one condition. But what comes after those words is the part that has remained hidden, and that hidden condition may not be what you think. You have probably wondered why this connection has felt different from the beginning. Why certain moments seem too perfectly timed. Why a simple conversation could stay in your mind for hours. Why one look could make you feel understood without a single explanation. You may have tried to convince yourself that you were imagining the intensity, that perhaps you were reading too much into small details, but somewhere inside you, another voice kept whispering that there was more to this story than what appeared on the surface, and soon you were going to discover why. There were moments when you felt close to this person, and then suddenly they became distant. You felt the warmth, then the silence. You sensed possibility, then uncertainty. Just when you thought the door was opening, it seemed to close again. And every time you tried to understand what was happening, another question appeared. Why would someone who seemed drawn to you suddenly hesitate? Why would someone who cared seem afraid to move closer? Why would love feel present and absent at the same time, as though something invisible was standing between two hearts that had already recognized each other? And what if that invisible barrier had a name? Maybe you thought the problem was you. Maybe you questioned your worth. Maybe you wondered whether you had said the wrong thing, moved too quickly, waited too long, or cared too deeply. You may have replayed conversations in your mind, searching for the moment when everything changed. But there is something you need to understand before you blame yourself for what you could not control. Sometimes a person pulls away not because they feel nothing, but because they feel something they are not prepared to face, and that possibility changes the entire meaning of their silence. This person has been fighting an internal battle that you could not see. On the outside, they may have looked calm. They may have continued with their responsibilities, smiled at people, answered messages, and acted as though nothing unusual was happening. But underneath that ordinary surface, something kept returning to their thoughts. Your presence. Your voice. Your kindness. The feeling they experienced whenever you were near. And the more they tried to push it away, the more impossible it became to ignore, because some connections do not disappear simply because someone is afraid to name them. There was a point when this person almost made a decision. They almost reached out. Almost confessed something. Almost crossed the distance between you. But then fear stepped in. Not fear of you, but fear of what choosing you would mean. Because choosing someone is not always about feelings. Sometimes choosing someone means letting go of an old identity, confronting old wounds, changing familiar patterns, and accepting a future that cannot be controlled. And that is where the real story begins. You may have believed this was simply about whether this person loved you or did not love you. But the deeper truth is more complicated. The question was never only whether they wanted you. The question was whether they were ready to become the person capable of loving you properly. And those are two completely different questions, because someone can desire your presence while still being afraid of the responsibility that comes with holding your heart. That is why the words have remained unfinished. I can only accept you as my partner on one condition. The sentence has been forming inside them for longer than you realize. They have imagined saying it in different ways. In a quiet conversation. During a late-night call. In a moment when neither of you could escape the truth. They have wondered how you would react. Would you misunderstand them? Would you walk away? Would you think they were demanding too much? Would you finally understand why they had been so hesitant? And every time they imagined the moment, they stopped before revealing the condition, because the condition is not as simple as you think. It is not about money, it is not about your appearance, it is not about your family, it is not about your achievements. It is not about you becoming someone else. The condition reaches deeper than all of those things. This person wants to know whether you are willing to accept the truth of who they are, while they are also learning to accept the truth of who you are. They do not want a relationship built on pretending. They do not want to be loved only when everything is beautiful. They do not want a connection that survives only during peaceful moments. Somewhere along their journey, they learned that temporary affection is easy, but genuine partnership requires courage, patience, honesty, and the willingness to remain when life stops being beautiful. And perhaps that is why this person has been watching you more carefully than you realize. They have noticed how you treat people when you have nothing to gain. They have noticed whether you keep your promises. They have noticed what happens when you are disappointed. They have noticed whether you become cruel when you are hurt. They have noticed whether your kindness disappears when nobody is watching. They have noticed how you respond when you do not get what you want. You thought they were simply observing you. But they were trying to answer a question that frightened them. Can I trust this person with the parts of myself I have spent years hiding? And that question has kept them awake more than once, because this person has been hurt before. Perhaps you already sensed that. Maybe you noticed the hesitation behind their smile. Maybe you felt that there were certain subjects they avoided. Maybe they became uncomfortable whenever the conversation became too emotionally serious. Maybe they seemed strong one day and strangely vulnerable the next. You may have mistaken their guardedness for indifference. But what if it was protection? What if they learned long ago that giving someone access to their heart could become dangerous? What if they once trusted someone completely and watched that trust become a weapon? What if they promised themselves they would never again become emotionally dependent on another person, and then you appeared? That is the twist they never expected. You did not arrive at a convenient time. You arrived at a transformative time. You appeared when they were trying to become emotionally independent. You appeared when they had decided they did not need anyone. You appeared when they had built walls so carefully that even they had forgotten what it felt like to live without them, and somehow, without forcing your way through those walls, you made them question why they were there in the first place. There is something almost mysterious about the way your paths crossed. You may have considered certain moments ordinary, but later you remembered them differently. A conversation that happened unexpectedly, a meeting that almost did not happen, a message sent at exactly the right moment, a strange coincidence that brought you into the same place, a moment when you were about to leave and something made you stay. A time when you were struggling silently and somehow this person appeared. You may have called these coincidences, but your heart kept collecting them like pieces of a puzzle whose picture you could not yet see, and perhaps the reason you could not see the picture was because the story was still unfolding. You wanted answers too quickly. You wanted to know whether this person was yours. You wanted certainty. You wanted a promise. But life was teaching you something different. Some connections are not revealed all at once. They unfold through moments, through pauses, through misunderstandings, through distance, through unexpected returns. Through conversations that begin casually and end with two people staring at each other in silence because something deeper has been spoken without words. And now you are approaching one of those moments. This person has reached a point where pretending is becoming harder than admitting the truth. They know they cannot continue acting as though you mean nothing. They know the connection has changed them. They know they have started imagining a future that includes you, and that realization frightens them because imagination can become hope, and hope can become vulnerability. But there is another reason they have hesitated. They are afraid that you may love an idea of them rather than the real person. They are afraid that you may love the version of them that appears when everything is easy, but leave when the hidden struggles become visible. They want to know whether you can see beyond the perfect moments. They want to know whether you can stay when they become quiet, whether you can communicate when emotions become complicated, whether you can forgive without losing yourself, whether you can love without controlling, whether you can support without rescuing, whether you can build instead of simply dreaming. That is why the condition has been growing inside them. I can only accept you as my partner if you accept my past. That may be the beginning of it, but not the whole truth, because accepting their past does not mean approving everything that happened.